Oh, Janelle, what was it, the sea level rise committee got canceled today?
Correct.
That would have been 3 in a row for me. It would have been all day, after a 3-hour marathon last night, so thank you.
Thank the chair. He canceled it.
Mhm.
So I think we're just missing Melanie. And Randy.
Oh, Janelle, I was reading some of the comments you posted from the public on the site. That was wide diversity of feelings about that. I particularly like the first version about diverting all traffic off of Sussex Drive. Yeah. That would have been a good trick.
Is there an engineer on board, Janelle? Maybe you can answer this question. I was riding around today, and one of the comments that Joe's referring to actually suggested having planted median down Sussex Drive, and I'm not sure if that's possible. But then I was riding my bike on DeVries Circle and noticed that that was basically what they were asking for. Do you know the width of the paved section of DeVries Circle?
I don't off the top of my head, but that is definitely a good question to ask when we get into session.
Yeah.
And Charlie's here, so he'll be able to answer that.
Right.
And Josh Elliott, who was here last time, will also be able to help.
All right.
And I've just reached out to Melanie and Randy to make sure they have the link for the meeting.
you think, Janelle? Should we go ahead and get started?
Yes, sorry, I forgot I was muted.
That's okay. Okay, there's that. All right. You haven't heard back from either Randy or Melanie?
Not yet. And
Okay.
I'm keeping an eye on the attendees just in case they pop in that way.
Yeah, I've got my screen showing you attendees as well. So, okay, so well, thank you all for joining us here today. I think Janelle's done an excellent job of making sure that any correspondence that has been received has been forwarded to you. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read it. I think Janelle also shared with you a list of potential conditions or points of discussion that we need to have today. And I would open it up to the floor. I think we had a very good first session, and I want to thank both Brians for being here and for your interest in and response to the questions that were raised at our last meeting, and look forward to having a few fruitful discussion here this afternoon. So, Janelle, would you like to add anything at this point?
So the conditions that I had shared, I did not, unfortunately, apologize, did not send to everybody. I sent them to Glenn to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but I can kind of go over what we'd heard. I will note there were comments that came in after the record closed, unfortunately. So those were not added to the website. But I can go over some of the comments that I'd heard and that I noted as potential conditions, and that would be like a potential fence behind the athletic fields that are adjacent to the residences, and some wanted it and some didn't. No lighting on the athletic fields, the installation of low height solar powered lighting around the walking paths, consideration of different windows on the building to promote a more historic residential aesthetic, consideration of bathrooms near the athletic fields, no new outfall into Blockhouse Pond, consideration of plantings within the stormwater management facilities, which we'd have to work with DENREC about, and then ensure safety for the crosswalk on Sussex Drive. And I know Anne Marie had some suggestions on that, and I had reached out to the applicant as well. She had an idea, and then I had an idea of, what we've seen lately as crosswalks, and is something you paint like a mural or something in the area that you want the crosswalk, or you do something creative with the crosswalk, and that actually has been shown to slow traffic down. So that was just an option we had looked at. And then there was also a concern about making sure that there was storage available for the athletic fields. So those were the potential conditions that I had heard based on everything you guys had put together at the meeting.
I think also included with the storage was restrooms and storage, right?
Yes.
Okay. So are there other comments here from the group individually that you'd like to make? You all have had a chance to read the correspondence that was received. Starts there. And then Brian Williams, if you could provide additional information in reference to any of the comments that Janelle just shared, that would be helpful. I think some of those things have been addressed, but we look forward to hearing from you about that. Yes,
Joe. The comment about no lighting on the athletic fields, that's totally off base. The architects, the engineers had a very good plan showing the lighting scheme and the direction of lighting, and it's just insane not to have lighting there on those athletic fields. It'll all be pointed away from the housing, pointed down, and it's just, it should be lit.
So my understanding is that the athletic fields were never proposed to be lit. And I think that's some of the things we'd heard from the public is they didn't want them lit. So a condition could be to ensure that they weren't lit. But what we had heard was we wanted to make sure, what I had heard was maybe the walking paths with some low level solar lighting could be lit to make sure people could, after dark use them, because the intent from my recollection was that nobody really wanted to use them. But if my recollection is incorrect, please let me know. But that's why that I threw that in, because from what I recall is people didn't want that.
That's what I recall as well.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Other comments? Sumner.
It may not be the only time I throw something at you, but yeah, I took another bike ride around the whole area this morning, having read through the comments that I guess did make it before the deadline. And one thing I found myself thinking about was this crosswalk and the mural painting idea that Janelle just suggested. It's an interesting idea. But what I started thinking about was just the arrangement of the 3 parcels. Having been an elementary school teacher for a few years, many years ago, I'm wondering about having all the sort of active aspects of students' lives requiring crossing a street. It seems to me that all classrooms, let me back up. Riding down Sussex Drive, looking into the front parcel where the school building will be, I saw what looked like a PE class that was running around on the track back there. And I'm assuming that none of that can happen without crossing Sussex Drive and walking either to the athletic fields that are right there behind the Lewes School, which is all under construction right now, or would it require going all the way back to the backfields back by Fred Thomas? And just I'm wondering about a time management issue. Kids, you only have so long during a recess or so long during a PE class. If they're spending half of it hiking to the place where they're going to do things, does that make sense?
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt. I just think it's probably easier if I answer some of these as they come up.
Yeah.
The elementary students in New Shields won't be coming over to the middle school parcel. So that track that's currently at Shields, that's going to go away with part of this new middle school plan. But the Shields students, when they move into their building, they'll be self-contained on that, what we call the Lewes School property. Their playground's right behind the building. There'll be their fields back there. They only go on that track now because that's their green space to run around, but they will be staying on that parcel. They won't be crossing Sussex Drive. Now, in the past, they did as 5th graders. You might remember we moved into the Lewes School a few years ago due to overcrowding, and we took 5th grade back and forth across that street for a year or two. And it worked great at the crosswalk area with the right staff supervision. So it has been done in the past, but the idea is elementary students will stay put there.
Okay.
The middle school students will stay on their site, which is current Shields. I mean, really the only time that they'll be crossing over is for athletics, mostly for after school type events. Everything else would hopefully be done on this site.
Right, and they're bigger kids. They should be a little better about that anyway. Okay, all right, that's cool.
And the distance to the Fred Thomas, that is obviously a concern, but the idea is that is really for athletic competition. There may be the random PE class that wants to use the track, but we'd expect that they'd use the pathways on the Lewes School site and the fields that are practice fields, et cetera, for most of the PE effort.
Okay. And we are looking at the crosswalk. The mural idea got us thinking, and we're kind of put a twist on that and starting looking at maybe some pavers that could be allowed with some colored pavers and some school colors, Lewis colors, something that makes it pop, but it's not, pure artwork. So we're certainly interested in that idea, anything to make it better. And we've squared it up so that it's not diagonal. We know that it can't be raised. So I think the crosswalk is something that we can definitely get resolved and we're willing to do. And if it's not artwork, again, we're kind of liking the colored pavers, kind of like a design type of look.
Well, thank you, Brian. And whether it be pavers or artwork or a combination of the two, what we're going to study is definitely and that was the idea of the plateau. And my apologies, we didn't pick that up in the code earlier. But there will be some effort, or a major effort, for traffic calming to address your concern about students crossing over, just general public using it, and just general safety, and not only aesthetically linking the two sites, but we've looked at a number of paver options, and we're going to find some way that addresses all these concerns.
Yeah. And the other two topics that came up, the lighting was correct, Janelle. You know, we weren't planning on lighting the athletic fields because there won't be night games. We'll move them to the high school, but there will be lighting on the site. And Joe, you had mentioned some of the letters that came in. A lot of them didn't want any lighting on after hours. You know, we have to have emergency lighting in the building and for custodial, and then for our staff that have access to the building to work, you know, we want to have some of that lighting in the parking lot. But all that is the same type that have gone through all of our other schools, you know, aiming down and shut off, you know, during the middle of the night type of situations. So that's no problem. And we did find really a lot of options for some small solar lights just for the path, something that shouldn't bother anyone from a distance, but just gives you a little bit of a guide where the path is. And we found some of those that we think look great. I mean, the amount of them, you know, would be up for discussion. I don't want to put 100 of them across and make, you know, have some planes landing in the area. But I think a few just showing where the path goes is something we're definitely interested in.
Certainly at the beginning and the end, and maybe sporadically throughout the site as, you know, as we determine moving forward.
Good.
So another question I had to do, thank you for that. And I'm sorry, having not grown up here, I always get confused as to which kids are where, and your correction about who's where helps enormously.
I did grow up here and we moved around a lot. All of
Okay.
those schools have been many different things over the years. My brothers and I, the buildings changed even among us. So that is certainly understandable.
So the other question, you know, building on a number of the comments that came out in the public comments, you know, clearly people have been worried about Sussex Drive and access to Highland Acres, you know, all along. One of the questions I have when I wrote down there this morning had to do with sidewalks and curbs, the conversation, you know, the questions about sidewalks and curbs and parking along Sussex Drive. Can you clarify? Because there's a sidewalk along the Lewes School on the Sussex Drive side of the Lewes School, and then it ends right there where the construction fencing opens up. And then there's a line of telephone poles that's right in line with the sidewalk, and there's construction vehicles parked along the side on the grass. And there seem to be some comments about parking in that kind of haphazard way. And I'm just wondering what the plan is.
So we looked at it from our side, because at one point we were hoping maybe we could run a fence by the athletic fields all the way to the road so that people don't have the option to park on the side. And then, you know, Zach Crouch and others pointed out that the poles are there and there's some easements with the city. So we'll go as far as we can. But that's going to, you know, and that issue's come up before with the city, and there's got to be a little bit of policing help there to keep people from doing that. I mean, if we're hoping, if it's someone there for a sporting event, our staff can move them, but we don't want people parking along that section. And now with the big parking lot for the elementary school and up here and with the pathways, hopefully that can be solved some. The sidewalk where it ends, you know, from our viewpoint, we take the sidewalk, you go across the crosswalk, and then there's all these, you know, thousands of feet of paths that we're putting in to get everyone where they need to go. So we feel like that more than covers our part. I don't really feel like personally that the district should extend that sidewalk from there down to the development, because everybody walking from our site would be crossing over at that crosswalk, and then we have ample pathways, you know, around the facility. If there's something that can be done on our side with our property, we'd gladly give an easement or something to help with the sidewalk, you know, on that side of Sussex Drive where the athletic fields are. But, you know, to us, the property where it ends, right where the new construction starts that the city is doing behind Shields, kind of seems like that's where our responsibility is. Then we get them across the road and then make sure we give them plenty of sidewalks on the athletic field site.
Okay. Another point, having been one of those lacrosse dads who's been in support mode for one of these tournaments, and imagining, and I'm not saying there are going to be a lot of these in the future, but if you have sporting events, and it could be something as simple as a middle school football game, in the event of some sort of a medical emergency, how would ambulances find their way onto some of these fields? It looks like you've got the sidewalks all set up. Are they all going to be wide enough that if you had to, you could drive an ambulance to the side of a field? It's way outside of my comfort zone, but it was just something that I found myself wondering, given the distance between the road and some of these fields.
I mean, all I know, I can just compare it to Beacon and Mariner. There are no paths leading to any of those fields if you go to Beacon and Mariner. It's grass fields. There have been entries there, and they just ride across the grass and pick them up. I mean,
Okay.
we're so close to the hospital here. I hope we could, carry them over if we needed to. But I would certainly expect in an emergency, if the path isn't wide enough, they would run right over it and run along the grass field.
Yeah, we're not intending like there would be, like bollards and chains to keep people from getting on, there'll be some, that, or maybe that's something we can look at right where those sidewalks enters, maybe some removable bollards or, maybe, to keep, people from driving on there when they shouldn't be. Well, hopefully, that's something we shouldn't have to consider, but we can look at how the sidewalk at Fred Thomas end and the Sussex Drive end, works. But yeah, certainly not our intent that the ambulance would be able to drive to the middle of the field on a paved surface. Obviously, we would, if there's an emergency, we're fine with them driving on the grass to go rescue that child as needed. But we weren't intending, we also anticipate, as you said, we don't anticipate having a bunch of play days or big tournaments like that. That we could foresee maybe YMCA soccer, things on a more limited basis. And yeah, there might be some crowds accumulating, but we're certainly not intending this to be some sort of regional athletic facility. That would happen at the high school. And even a middle school game as into it as Cape, athletics and parents are, we don't really anticipate this having the same sort of population by any stretch as a high school game would. And if it starts to become that, then those events would move to the high school. If that started to become an impact on the neighborhood, we hear those already, and this isn't even happening. So we certainly aren't going to make it worse. And if it starts to become out of control, then these sort of major events would move to the high school.
Something for us to keep in mind, and we can make a note of, there's an existing fence on Sussex Drive near where the old football field was. And it has the giant swing gate back there that kind of leads to that concession stand. All that's going to get demoed, but that existing fence, I think if there's budgeting allowed, we're wanting to replace it with new fence. I'd like to make a note to put that double gate there, because that would be a whole lot easier for an ambulance to back in there like they did 80 years ago for football. And at least then that would shorten the path, instead of them coming in from Shields. So that's a good point. And, it'll either be that existing fence, which will keep that gate, or if we replace it, we'll make a note to put a new gate in there. And that way we have ambulance access on that side. Up at Fred Thomas, shouldn't be a problem because the fence isn't going to go up on that side. That's kind of runs parallel to DuPont Avenue. So they should be able to go right across the parking lot there to get to that field. So,
Thank you. Yeah, that Brian Bassett, that's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about, that double gate thing you were just talking about. That's exactly what I had in mind. I will note that in my riding around, I bumped into a neighbor on Sussex Drive who said he'd grown up in the area and he was looking forward to a football field being back there. They were actually talking about building some sort of platform so they could view the games from their backyard. So anyway, thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
There was another question. I'll come back to it later. I can't remember what it was. I got to think about it.
Other comments?
I just have maybe a point of clarification for Janelle. Will I have a chance to review the final plans in detail? I'm assuming I will, right?
Yes. So for everybody who's listening, and we've got 9 people also in attending. So this is for this group to make a recommendation to mayor and council. Mayor and council will then hold a public hearing and then make their decision. And if it is if mayor and council approves it, then they will work with agencies to obtain approval on the site plan basis. And then once staff will actually stamp it approved once we get all agency approvals and it complies with any and all conditions placed upon it. And so what I'm hearing is maybe another possible condition is that if the city manager and or mayor determine that events are getting too large, that they can tell the school district to move the events to a different location to alleviate some of the issues of traffic. Does that sound like
and there may be a bake sale usage that we think is going to have 50 people and 1,000 show up? Well, then if you let us know that, hey, that event was an issue, then next year we won't allow them to reserve that space. Because there will be a few of those where if it's a new group, you don't know, we ask on the form expected number of attendees, and our plan is to route them to everywhere else that can hold it. And that would not be, this particular site.
I do have a couple of other questions. You mentioned demoing a fence, and actually with that neighbor that I bumped into, he was curious if the old rusty fence behind his house, you know, what the plan, if there is one, would be for all the existing fences that exist around the perimeter of these fields. You know, in the process of upgrading everything, are you going to be redoing those perimeter fences? I realize you don't want to build dog parks, and he definitely wasn't interested in dog parks.
Right. Yeah. We usually list those as an alternate. I would love to replace them, but if they're working and serving the purpose, then we like to make sure we have money for everything else first. So the last couple projects that we've done, you know, once we're done and in and closed everything out, then we've gone back in and, you know, we just finished that with Rehoboth with some landscaping cleanup and some fence repairs along its border. So, you know, our intent would be the same thing here. The fences that are working, you know, we'll probably leave them as they are for base bid, but our intent would be, let's bid it as an alternate. And hopefully we have good fortune like we have in the past, and we can, you know, have money at the end to replace those. And there may be a few that we identify that are damaged, or like that one with the gate, you know, if that gate's going to serve an important role, then, you know, maybe the portion along Sussex Drive, you know, makes it into base bid. And we could evaluate that, Brian, which ones. But I do think that section, the one along the homes, gets a little bit trickier because some people have installed some gates of their own that they use, and some other things get a little tricky when you go to tear it down.
And there's questions of access as well. If it goes behind Fred Thomas, it might be hard to get into to do that at this point, but we'll certainly going to look at the site as a whole. I mean, we see this as a campus, so we're going to look at the site as a whole as we continue to develop things.
Right.
So just to clarify, because there were a number of questions in the public comments about parking along Sussex Drive. What is your intent for parking along Sussex Drive? Is there any along the lines that the school district owns?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want any there. If we can put landscaping in that area to help prevent it. And I know Brian's got a new landscaping count. I think that was a question that came up, but I think it's a couple hundred new trees that we're putting in. You know, our biggest roadblock when we looked at that road was the light, you know, the power poles and that I think Zach had pointed out, the easement or whatever that the city has there that we really couldn't go into. So we'll do as much as we can up to our property line. And if we could do anything up to the road, you know, landscaping or other things to prevent that, we would, but we don't want anyone parking over there. And if it's a coach or a parent, you know, we can police that and get them out of there. If it's just somebody that's visiting the area and they want to park there to go, you know, play catch, that's very hard for us to police.
That's also a topic that can be picked up by city council as creating that as a no parking zone, and posting it as necessary.
Yeah, and we tried to position our faculty lot on our school site, and you know, the use of the bus lot and the other parking lots on the Lewes School site would hopefully support that to some degree. But yeah, we cannot put parking on the Lewes School site where we're putting fields just because of issues of stormwater and getting fields to fit. So, you know, we try to do what we could with the parking lots on the sites that we could control, but we do not want parking along Sussex. Is not what we intend or certainly promote. And we'd like to find ways of discouraging it.
Right. I've got another traffic question, but I first want to come back to something I asked in the first meeting, and it sounds like Janelle kind of captured it as a condition or exploring a condition that had to do with several of the comments that the public made about trees in the backs of some of these lots, like off of DuPont and Johnson and back by the Fred Thomas building. On the, I guess it would be the northeast end of the football field, the Johnson side of the football field. There are a number of trees right now that you have slated on one of your maps to take out. I guess I would hope that there would at least be a one-to-one replacement for any tree that's on the property that we get. You know, we call ourselves a tree city, that we would be putting trees back somewhere, maybe where they make better sense. But I'm hoping that there's a way that we can explore buffering the properties along that stormwater basin. I realize you don't want to plant in the basin, but I'm assuming that you're going to be back at grade before you transition to the neighboring properties. Maybe there's something that can be done, you know, up on top.
Yeah, I have to check. I mean, our hope is to not take any out. So if there's any that are marked to come out, I'm hoping that it's because it's interfering with what would be that stormwater area. We can check with our team. If it's not interfering with the stormwater area, then I don't want it to come out. I'd prefer it to stay there. But I do know, Brian, do you have the number with you exactly? Because that was missing from the thing on how many trees we were putting in already. I want to say it's 280, something like that, Brian.
218 trees,
18.
which is far more than are there and way more than going on the Lewes School. So we will certainly at least have a one-to-one. We're going to be more than one. We'll be adding trees left and right. But as far as a shielding element, that is really just going to have to come down to our discussions with DenRec, and what we can put in there, what we can put close to it. These stormwater retention, there's certain banks, and as you can imagine, that you can't put things too close. Roots will come in and deteriorate it. So we're certainly, the count of trees is a massive upgrade. It's just where we're going to be able to put them. We're going to try to be sensitive to our neighbors, but we have to address the stormwater needs that site has and will have first.
Something else to consider, these are just trees from this project. So the Shields project is also putting in tons more trees than are coming out. So altogether between the 3 parcels, the count is way up. This one is more than the new Shields. It's a different architect. I think Brian's group, they got a lot more trees in here, which is good with me. I'm fine with that. But we'll look at that area up there by Johnson Avenue. Mm-hmm. And before I forget, Janelle and a few of you mentioned, Mayor, the restrooms. Something I just wanted to update you on. Up at the Fred Thomas site, we will have a maintenance building, either the current one, or if money allows, a replacement of where that current one sits. And we would like to put some, bathrooms there that have exterior access for that field.
Okay.
For the Lewes School site, we actually just made the change, the exterior wall where the new playground is. So, and that's facing the athletic fields on the Lewes School. Those doors are like the 3 new elementary schools, where you go inside and there's a bathroom in there, and it's a locked, contained area. So our goal at the other schools, and we've made the change to do this here, is those will be unlocked. We can control it through access control for events, and people can go in, but they can't get in the rest of the building. So, and that's also good for our kids when they're out at that playground. But we can leave those open every night till 9 o'clock at night, or something. But that would be, it'll look a lot more attractive than just a standalone 1 or 2 stall restaurant out there. It's part of the main building. And we'll just have to have signage letting people know to go there. But most of the people that are there for that baseball and softball field are probably going to have younger kids that are on that new playground as well. And the bathrooms there should be great. So we'll have bathrooms at the new middle school, and then at the Lewes School site, and then at the maintenance building up at Fred Thomas.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So a number of the other public comments had to do with your traffic routing. Having had my kids go to a school that was in a neighborhood like this, there was a constant dialogue between the school and the neighborhood and how traffic worked. I mean, it's something we all have to live with. I'm hoping maybe there's a way to at least explain why it is that you are doing what you're doing, why you may or may not be able to put all the cars down that Savannah Road access rather than down the Sussex Drive access. But looking at the site when I was riding around today, if I understand the way you're going to do it, you're going to have this long driveway at the west end of the property that will go all the way back into the corner, and there'll be that turnaround circle. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, you're going to end up having all these cars that are basically just sitting in a line idling right next to a bunch of residential buildings just across the chain link fence there, that university housing site. I don't know what the rules are or should be or whatever, but I'm just trying to imagine what that's going to look like at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, 3:30, whatever it is, on an afternoon. And I can't imagine what the alternative would be, but I'm hoping you guys can explain.
We could try to enforce a no idle zone. I know the issue now, and it's gotten better with the new schools that have opened, but it's the parents that get there so early because there's not enough space to line up. They're just worried about not getting a spot. So they'll get there an hour early. Now that this queue is long enough, I think the parents will realize, hey, it's a better system. There's going to be a spot for us. I'm not going to be sticking out on Savannah. And we can try to get them to show up, a few minutes before school lets out, but not, an hour early just to, sit and read a book. And if that's occurring, we can certainly go out and inform them and put signs up that if you're sitting here, it's no idle, because we don't want that emissions running either. As far as the Savannah entrance, I mean, that mostly comes down to DelDOT. I know Zach and DBF are on, but DelDOT would not allow all that traffic. If we made that our only entrance, I mean, there would be some major work that would need to be done to Savannah. That's just not possible with turn lanes and, widening of that road. So there, the amount of traffic we have coming in there now just for events and essential staff, if you will, is right at the limit with DelDOT. We just met with them, last week, and they were still having some concerns and questions about the amount of traffic that we're currently showing off of Savannah. So if we told them that we were closing the Sussex one and bringing all the parents in that way, I don't think that would happen. I'm fairly certain. And Zach, if I'm incorrect, please speak up and let me know. So, but getting everybody off that road, looked at it, it's a long enough queue. It matches HOB and, the Love Creek School, which, had tons of parent traffic, and it's able to hold it. So we really believe it'll be able to do that. It is going to improve the situation because everyone remembers the dark days of 2 schools on this site for 60 years. And one of those schools was the consortium that had twice the number of buses that this school will have, because of the nature of the program. And they started at the same time or within 5 or 10 minutes. So with this being an hour apart and with the additional bus loop or bus parking lot at New Shields and the parent and visitor parking lot at New Shields, it's just going to automatically make it better. So it's not going to be what people remember when there was 2 schools here. In a perfect world, I'd love to have twice the amount of property I have and change a few things up. But I really do believe that this is the best that can be done. And I think it's going to be a vast improvement from what people saw, a few years ago on the site. But I do share your concern about people sitting there and idling along that road. And, if we want to make a condition of some signage and, we monitor that people aren't running their vehicles. And I do think people won't show up as early as what they have in the past.
And thank you, Brian. I think that covered a lot of it. I think another thing to consider is site access for emergency. We're certainly not going to be permitted to have one in and out. We don't like to think of those things, but it's for security, for fire or police or other need, ambulance, anything. We're going to want 2 ways in. We certainly can't, number one, for convenience. Number 2, if one is blocked, if it's used for in and out only on Savannah, we run a great risk of, people not being able to get in. We were I think, Brian addressed this. We were trying to be very thoughtful. There are currently 3 ways in a parking lot right up against Sussex. We were trying to really make one controlled point onto Sussex. There are no other ins and outs onto Sussex to boggle up traffic. We'll have a very clear in and out. And again, we'll look at the idling issue. But we really vastly, even above these other schools you mentioned, it's a very long, we figure at least 40 something cars can fit in there at one time. So we think there really won't be any waiting issues with the, as Brian said, showing up early. And the district is always wants the parents out quickly. So they'll be moving the kids. The entrance that the kids will be leaving is right there. And they will obviously try to run that as efficiently as possible. But we really tried, we know the Highland Acres folks, have had a lot to say about the previous school and the school that we're talking about now. And we really try to take those in mind. And the Lewes School is on Sussex. So there's already traffic on Sussex. That's already happening. And with an hour later, we won't be compounding that. We'll just be using the same safety and convenience factors that the Lewes School is able to.
One other quick thought, thank you, Brian, is that Shields at one point had over 800 students on this site.
Thank you. I forgot that.
When my kids were in elementary, I drove them to school too, because I just felt, and then when they got to middle and high school, I was like, it's time for the bus to take over. And we see that at Beacon and Mariner a lot as well. But this school is going to have around 550 students. It's going to be about its cap that we put on it. I know by name it's 600 students, but it's going to have about 550, and they're middle school age. So just naturally, it's going to be less parents than when there was 800 Shields Elementary students here.
Yeah, and I would just add one other thing. I mean, we did meet with DelDOT and already had a pre-submittal meeting with them. And actually, we plan on submitting plans to them by next Friday. But please also keep in mind that the existing school, all the traffic uses Sussex Drive right now. Every bus, every parent pickup, and every staff member uses Sussex.
Events also, sorry.
Because on Sussex and on Savannah, I mean, that's a do not enter. It's one way. So now what we're doing is we're shifting all the bus traffic and some of the staff members to Savannah, which is really going to clear up and also, you know, the availability of Sussex Drive. So there's going to be a huge increase in safety as well as a number of different features that's going to help this project. And of course, when the elementary school gets open, I mean, there again, the same situation there where you're going to have, you know, the parents and the buses separated, and there's going to be a huge decrease in traffic using Sussex Drive based on these two concepts.
And just for the record, that was Zach Crouch with DBF, just in case somebody needs it for the record or the minutes. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments about the having multiple access points. I couldn't imagine having a school with only one way in and one way out. That doesn't make sense. I don't think there should be a neighborhood in Lewes that does that either, but that's another story. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
If I could ask, I know you had mentioned, Janelle, you had a list of some possible conditions. One of the ones I heard in that list was something to do with historic. I missed the exact phrasing, but I don't know if we can ask about that or have a discussion. The rest of them I think I'm okay with or have replied to, but.
So what I had heard from the last meeting was there was some concerns about maybe looking at different window type to make it more of a residential or a better fit with the historic residential aspect that's on the other side. So the proposed, if they so choose, they can use it. It was a proposed condition of different windows on the buildings to promote a more historic or residential aesthetic.
Yeah, and Janelle, I made comment about that. So if I could add a little more. I'm just looking at that, and I know it's not, the middle school is not going to be in the historic district, but looking at the 1920s Lewes School, I'm just looking for streetscape there and how it would blend in with the old school. I think it would be better, and I'm not talking about the interior design of the middle school. I'm really not into that at all. That's not something we look at from a historical standpoint. But from the outside of the building, yes, I brought up the windows because the windows just look so modern when you put it again. The schools are like, what, 300 feet apart or something like that?
Yeah, but if I could add the direction that those windows are facing on that classroom wing. If we could show you the view of the side of Shields, because I don't think I think you're seeing the front of the Lewes School from Savannah. If Brian could share his screen, the side that this school is facing has basically the newer style windows that we're seeing in the back of Shields. So, you know, we're trying to tie it into a bit of that as well. So when people are, you know, on the athletic fields, that's what they're seeing. Brian, I think there was a few color renderings is actually what I'm looking for. I don't know if this is Janelle on the screen or Brian.
Yeah, that's not me. These are the construction drawings, the black and white, and they're kind of hard to.
A couple color renderings that we showed when we went through with Shields that I just would like to show again of the back of Shields, which has the playground, and then the side that's going to be facing this building, because those, you know, match. I agree with you. The front of the historic building is very difficult to match to. It's great, and I'm so glad we were able to keep that for everyone involved. But you don't really get a glimpse of that with the windows on the side that you're thinking, because that 3-story section is going to be facing this other area that we'll hopefully be able to show you.
Okay. The other comment I made too is about the entrance. The entrance to the middle school is so ultra modern. Is there anything we can do with that? I mean, that entrance is so ultra modern.
Yeah, I just want so this is the entrance to the Lewes School. So this is facing the graveyard side, but you know, that's a very modern looking side to that building as well. And if you go back one slide, Brian, that kind of shows it in comparison to the front. So there's the historic section that you get with that street, you know, front presence. That's what we wanted. And then we thought we did have a chance to make it fun for the kids because it is school. that, we all get the historic front when we drive down, and then kind of tucked behind the building is the newer element. So if you kind of go around that building, Brian, and
Miss Janelle's got this.
oh, thanks, Janelle. And keep clicking a few more, you'll get around to the back. So that's facing the, there's a snowman picture in here too. That's how I know I'm in the right spot. That's facing the graveyard side. A few more where it almost turns. Yeah, there we go. That's the,
There he is.
yeah, one more after that. There we go. So this is the side that's facing the playground and facing that whole rear of the Lewes School property. So if you're on those athletic fields or you're on Sussex Drive, this is what you're seeing on that side of the building. Some metal panels, more modern windows, not the historic windows like the front of the building. And I think the picture should go in order, Janelle, and it swings around to the side that'll actually be facing this new middle school. If you wouldn't mind moving a few more forward. And of course, the playground's definitely pretty modern looking. Yeah, keep going. So there we go. So this is the side where, if you come out of the new middle school, you can see the historic portion up on the right, but as it wraps around the building, it becomes more like what we see nowadays with schools when we can't, afford to do the DuPont, style school. So that's going to kind of be the counterpart to this 3-story section that you're showing. Now that point that you asked about, the glass area where the library is, that's certainly a modern kind of wow spot that I think the one rendering of it shown, lit up at night, I think looks great, but it's such a small piece. It's a not very wide, because it's just that one corner of the building, and it's so far away that, again, I think the eye is going to go to the historic part. So this is probably one where I'm just going to politely disagree with the comments. I can certainly respect it, but we just feel like that we really did our part to keep that historic front to Savannah that everyone's going to see. And then when you get on the property and you're standing on the athletic fields, then we get to have a little fun with the schools. And we have looked, we're messing with changing the window trim to like a white to try to blend in more with the Marvin windows. We're have some examples of those panels to show that they actually are more of a wood tone. We'll certainly look at all those things. There was an option of, I think it was some cornice that, around the top of the building that we're pulling up a few options for that. That's more of a metal cornice.
Make it a little more pronounced. Sorry, Brian, make it a little there. And there, when the renderings you were looking at last week were very diagrammatic, we're getting into more detail. There was a cornice on top, just now we're looking at maybe more of a fascia or more of a pronounced cornice to sort of, so I know there was a comment about it, infinitely going into space. I understand that. But we know we have a coping of some sort. So we're looking at some sort of, ones that are integral with our building type that would work and sort of define that top, and maybe that would be a gesture as well. But these are, we're still early in design. These are, despite as I said, when we presented them, despite looking fairly complete, we're still in, just the early parts of design development. So, there's a lot to be determined, a lot to be sorted out. But as Brian said, this is the direction, we're heading.
Yeah, we can keep looking at the windows. I don't want to be handcuffed by it. The problem, and you had mentioned that the inside really wasn't, you guys' concern, which I appreciate. What we ran into when we tried to put these Marvin historic windows on this one is the function of the inside. Behind that 3-story section is our big learning village where it all opens up, and learning commons, and the way the classrooms interact with each other, they really need those taller, floor to ceiling almost windows. And when we were switching them out to see what it would look like, it is then changing the function of that classroom wing, because it is a single load corridor and we need that glass coming in. There's not a classroom behind that row that you see. And if we switch the windows, it was changing the function of those classrooms in those areas, which I didn't feel comfortable with the district. So if there's a way we can change these with the framing color or, adjust it a little bit, we can. And I know this is a long-winded answer, I apologize, but I wanted you to see the back of Shields to see that, it's not like that building around the entire side is that historic building.
Hey, you guys really spoiled me. I mean, what you did with the high school was fabulous. That's absolutely beautiful. And the treatment on those windows and the design, the corners and the cornices up. I mean, just fabulous job. And that would have really fit in well with the 1920s old high school, of which I went to, that faces Savannah. It just would have been a good fit there. It looks to me like, and I hate to keep belaboring this, but it looks like to me you're plugging in a middle school here that, you see in a lot of places all over the state. But I'm just kind of looking at what we have there now and Lewes proper. And it just seemed to be, we could have gotten a better fit. If it's too late, it's too late. There's nothing we can do about it at this point. But whatever you can do to make anything, to help it blend in with the 1920 school, any way you can do it, through windows, through entrances, you know, any of that, to bring it more to a historical view, like the high school. I could use that as an example. It's just absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we'll say, I appreciate the comments, and look, I guarantee you, we're going to keep trying. No one wants this to be the crown jewel more than me. This is our 10th project at the line of all these referendums that we started years ago. And every trick we've learned, every success we've had, every failure we've had has gone into this one. And Brian knows this. That's why his firm wanted this project so much. And Mr. Fulton, I mean, this we want to be something that people come from miles around to say, look what Lewes has going on. And you know, we get the bonus that they get to go next door to that historic building and see what we've done with it. I mean, to keep that front, but for the back to be what we've turned that into. But we want them to walk out on those fields and then see this building and just be amazed. I mean, Lewes is a destination already, but I mean, I don't want to ramble on and on about it, but I'm not going to throw up, you know, a JCPenney that somebody mentioned. This is going to be a beautiful building. And even though you don't want to see what's inside, when you listen in on a few upcoming meetings and you see what's going inside this building, it blows my mind. And I've been in this for so many years now. To see so many schools, it's hard to wow me. This one has wowed me. And the high school that you mentioned, you know, we got some pushback on that addition because we changed the windows some from the original building. But when you ride down the road, you don't notice it. It looks great, but it's meeting the new function. And behind the building, they're floor to ceiling facing the new courtyard. So we really got the best of both worlds. And if we can pull that off, we're going to do it. And I don't think it has to get to the level of saying these are the windows you have to use. It's just us hearing you and saying we get it, and we're going to, you know, we take great pride in it. And I love the way that high school looks. And if we can do that and make it better than that, that's what we're going to shoot for.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in here with a little perspective, so you know where I'm coming from. I went to Lewes School as well. I was for junior high school then, so I know that. I'm very, very glad. I was on the task force that recommended to Brian and the district that they keep the Lewes School. There was some talk that it wouldn't happen. I recommended. I wasn't the only voice, but I was I was an architectural voice. You know, I strongly pushed for that to be saved. I've done historic renovations up and down the state. I look at Howard High School, look at PS DuPont in Wilmington, Booker T, and you know, so I've done those as well. So you know, this isn't in a vacuum where this school's coming from. I did the high school addition that Brian's referring to, and we sort of stretched our legs on that a little bit, and we just took this to what we thought was a natural conclusion of allowing the Lewes School to be the historic centerpiece, and then more take our cues off the backside. And, you know, we're going to work to refine it, but we really feel like how you're going to experience this building, I think will take some of the sting out of what you're feeling with it not being as historic.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you continue to look at it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I read on Wikipedia that Pierre DuPont Foundation, whatever year it was in the 20s, gave $200,000 and the city of Lewes gave $50,000 for the Lewes School, right?
Yeah.
I know that it's going to be a little more than that to do this.
It would be, I mean, we had some estimates done on Howard School, and it's magnitudes of order of money to build the schools in the manner which they were built. So it's not just budget and economics, but it plays a major part. And it, you know, and I don't want to go down too far down a rabbit hole, but to try to replicate something historic like that and fall short, I think is a worse sin than to just do something that complements it. And that's our goal.
Well said.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned that the color of the school the color of the brick in the school is going to be that blonde nature, in light of Bill Landon's comments about historic nature.
Yeah, Mr. Becker, thank you. The brick that we're using on the middle school is a direct color match and pattern match for the not historic school, but the current Shield school. So we're trying to make some of those gestures. We know it doesn't have the same historic weight that, you know, obviously that the Lewes School does, but we're trying that among other gestures and some proportional things to try to speak to that in some regard, even not as clearly as obviously a straight on restoration and preservation.
Other comments? Mike,
Yeah, I would just like to thank you also for being a bit flexible and sort of looking at the ultimate design and being sensitive to the more architectural styles that are part of the fabric of Lewes. It is one of the criteria that we have to look at when reviewing these types of proposals. As Bill had mentioned, and I think as Brian had mentioned too, Cape High School, I think, is absolutely beautiful. I was reminded that it won the Architectural Digest Award is for the best new high school in Delaware in 2017. And as I sort of visited the site over the last week or so, I can appreciate when you're looking at the main building there, the rotunda, which was part of the original structure, and then off to the left, that's sort of to the playing fields there, is a bit more modern structure that does integrate band windows like what you're proposing for this project here. But there was the integration of divided lights in the band there that sort of reflects what we see here in town. In addition, and I think, Brian Williams, you had mentioned as well that you're looking at the possibility of integrating bands across the top of the structure that will sort of delineate between either the brickwork or the upper portion of the structure. And I think that adds to the style. And then I appreciate as well the possibility of you guys looking into the addition of some sort of delineation above the windows in terms of lintels that might, again, break it up a little bit. But no, other than that, I think that this is going to be a great addition to the cityscape, and I know that you guys will, in the end, come up with a plan that not only complements the existing Lewes School, but is compatible with the new addition to the Lewes School. So that's all. The other thing as well too, on the landscaping front, I did notice, I'm not an expert on landscaping, but I did notice that you guys are going to have a contract for the edging of all of the beds and the mulching and what have you, and you're going to try and use native species to the fullest extent possible. And I think that that's going to be really, really important for not just the neighborhood, but for the city as well, and as a sort of a resource conservation thing, and for native pollinators and for wildlife that's here in the community. I think that that'll be a real plus. So
I think the middle schoolers will be the wildlife.
yeah. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Janelle, were there any on the list that maybe we haven't addressed? I know we tried to cover the bollard lighting, parking quite a bit, the stormwater, some of those are pending, other agency reviews. Were there any? I don't want to miss any that we were expected to revisit today.
Nope, and I think we've discussed there's a couple of different options of how to address the crosswalk. But I've just kind of added to the list of potential conditions from what I've been hearing. I just like to keep track just in case when a motion is made, hopefully this afternoon, that there's some ideas. And then I've added, as proffered by the applicant, that at least a minimum of 218 trees are to be planted throughout the site with the use of native species, as proffered by the applicant, that there will be exterior bathroom access at Fred Thomas and the Lewes Elementary School, to consider installing no idling signage along the pickup and drop off loop. And then back to the architecture is considering an appropriate cornice around the building to tie into the historic and residential aesthetic.
Janelle, I think you also raised a question about the storage facility, and I don't think we talked about that.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. For the equipment
For equipment
around the
at the fields.
the athletic
You had it on
fields.
the drawing, but is there, have you
Yeah.
given more thought to that since our last conversation?
The current maintenance building up there at Fred Thomas, that would be becoming the athletic storage. Just looking at it, and it looks like that one can be expanded or replaced, and we can make that into the storage area. And then also we can put in the plumbing for the restrooms there for the field usage. So I think there, there may need to be a few small sheds like there's currently at Shields for, some supplies. And but I think between the big maintenance buildings at each school, I think we'll have that storage covered at each area for athletics.
Yeah, I think it being near the at the Fred Thomas would be where we would store any track equipment. That'd probably be the major thing. Obviously, goals and things like that, wouldn't fit in a storage unit anyway, so we would have to maybe move those or do it. But as far as sports related stuff and any football related items, that would be best served at the Fred Thomas. But we'll look at some other smaller things as needed across the Lewes property, the Lewes school property.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm not sure where we are in terms of, when it's appropriate to deal with motions, but I think before I could make a motion, I'd have to review that long list that Janelle went through. I'd have to be able to look at it if that's possible. I don't know when, but I'm hoping before we get to that stage, we can review that list that you've got building, Janelle.
Let me email it.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do if you can put it out right now.
Actually, let me give me just 1 minute.
You just muted yourself.
So if there's any more questions, let me finish typing all of them because I've been writing them down, and then I can share my screen.
Okay, good.
So I'm just flipping through the maps here while Janelle's doing that. The play fields, I guess in that middle lot behind the Lewes School, what's marked, I'm looking at a pathway map. What's marked as C, secondary pathway on the play fields at Lewes School.
Yeah,
property.
yes.
That's on the city land, as I understand it. Is that
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. That was and I don't know if maybe that wasn't the best thing to bring that up at. I wanted, when we presented last time, we were starting to get that those were future possibilities to discuss. I don't think that's something we would look to be as part of this, that's something that is in this project at this point necessarily. And again, I don't want to muddy the waters. If it's best, we just remove those now and discuss those later. We just wanted to give you our entire design thought, and broach those issues as they came up. So that the pavilion is also in a leased parcel of land. That again, that could be moved, but that's where we feel the best part is. So any of those alternative items, particularly the ones that are on the border between Blockhouse Pond and then again that leased property, we could discuss those at a future date. I don't know if that has to be part of the motion at this time. We honestly don't feel like we necessarily have the budget for that right now. We wanted to, as a whole design, make sure if any of those had stormwater impacts, we covered that in our design, but that's not something that's currently really high on our radar right now as far as probability, but we just wanted to make it aware to this group.
In that same area though, we would like to take down that old fence between Blockhouse Pond and that area. It came up a few years ago on Fred Thomas where we didn't know who owned that section of old fence where the farmer's market was. And I still can't, I think it may have been us, but the city came and took it down with, asked if they could. And we said, certainly. So that part came down, and I think probably everybody would be in favor of removing the rest of that down so that people could have access from the site through there. So I don't know if that's part of this committee or something else, but we would make that part of the demo work for the project if everyone's okay with us removing that part of the fence. And if it needs more investigation, that's fine, but we would love to see it removed if you all would.
Yeah, Brian, I have to say, having stood basically at the Fred Thomas corner of box A on this map I'm looking at, where the observation tower could possibly be, looking across the new stormwater pond, I love the idea of getting rid of those fences, first of all, but I definitely hope that there's a way to do the bridge,
Yeah.
item D, the boardwalk. I think that's a really cool possibility.
I know on our list, the bridge
I-
is at the top. The tower is is dead last. I mean, it's at the bottom, not
Your
because.
insurance company believes so.
Yeah, there's a few, and then a couple comments from the public came in, about, they wouldn't want it to be visible into residential areas. I think there's a few issues with that. And I know talking with Mr. Fulton, with our funding being, eventually limited, that would be at the very, very, very end of the list. And even then with a ton of conditions. So, and if it even meant removing it now, we would be fine doing that. And we would much prefer to put the money into those boardwalks or, paths that go over top of the pond. And there's another one over on the actual middle school site, I think, Brian, that's got like a little
Correct.
patio area.
And to clarify, which was unclear last time, those are elevated and they would be in the manner, we had brought some images. I don't think we need to go through that. That could be at a future meeting, but the design intent would be very similar to those at the Gordon's Pond area or perhaps the one in town near the Overfalls Park.
Right.
It'd be some combination or some referential to that. So some elevated, looks nautical. That would be it wood or some I want to say fake, but manufactured wood, something, something of that appearance. And we can get into that as we move forward throughout the course of the project. But that was unclear last time. There would be an elevated bridge type of a boardwalk, a proper boardwalk, but at both those locations. But that, as Brian's saying, that would be our highest priority as well as far as an alternate. And we obviously had to get DENREC approval for that, for particularly the one at the Lewes School would be the most challenging one. But those are higher on our priority list, and we feel they're very important.
Well, that was a great question to bring up because I think that does require some discussion because in reference to locating that sidewalk on the city's property, if we do take down that fence, and I know this was something that we're showing on our plans, and I know it was brought up saying, should we discuss that now or later? But, from my eyes, it's something that we kind of need to discuss now because from a design perspective, I mean, it's part of my permitting set and a number of different issues that we're dealing with. And if this is something that the city, just like the area that they lease from the school district for the farmers market, I mean, is this something the city will entertain? And if so, what's the proper procedure to do that? Because as you can see, I mean, if Janelle could bring up that one sheet, I mean, that's going to change the configuration of the sidewalks around this existing pond if we do not pursue that. And I think that's a very important part of making this whole thing work, because if we leave here saying that it's not required, that's great, we can make the adjustments. If it's something that we can entertain, then I'm sure there's a process to do that.
I think you could make it as a recommendation that the fence be removed as part of this approval process.
Okay, but what about the sidewalk that goes onto the city's land?
Let's look at the drawing.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm looking at the drawing. I think the secondary pathway I marked as item C, if that's I'm assuming kind of what you're talking about. That's what I'm thinking about. That's on land that I guess the city leases from the school district. And I know the farmers market is located in there every Saturday during their time. I'm assuming Parks and Rec would have to be involved. And frankly, I got to say, having stood down there in that corner, like I said, just this morning, I think there should be some effort to sort of tie whatever trail system you have together with the pathways that exist in and around the Blockhouse Pond area. Because there's like a weird asphalt sidewalk that sort of comes up from the pond toward the Fred Thomas building and comes to that fence and then just dies in the grass.
That's right.
So Janelle actually pulled this up, which is great. And Janelle, if you could just highlight the area that's over on the city's land, that would be great.
Right there, yeah.
The sidewalk, which is just north of that.
That curve right there.
That one, Janelle.
That's the one that to me is pretty important, because if that's something that there's no interest in, then you can see how that kind of affects going around the pond. And then again, it brings into the account the bridge over the pond. If not, then, that's a long, things are got to be adjusted to accommodate the access points.
Hey, Zach, are we showing a sidewalk that runs where the existing one is, right along that fence line, if it was zoomed in a little bit?
I think you
Or
are.
is this curve one the replacement for
Yeah,
that?
this is the landscape architectural plans, which they didn't turn off layers, but there is an existing one on there you can see
Okay,
that runs right along the property line, which
right. So I guess to your point, if the curved one's more, it just looks better and maybe would serve the city or farmer's market a little bit better. But if that causes issues, if there's an option to just straighten it out and run it where that fence currently goes, and we could just take the fence down,
Right,
could do that. I think this was just the,
right.
artistic
correct.
vision.
I think that you could do either or there, and the idea of the curved sidewalk could be added to it, as part of it later.
Okay.
Okay, but I do think that taking the fence down could be part of the notion, because I think aesthetically, removing that fence connects the two properties better.
Good.
I agree
We'd
with
be in
that.
favor of that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that Parks and Rec would have to sort of weigh in on that
They should review it, yeah.
that curve, yeah, but somehow having some sort of pathway that runs either right along that existing fence or the new one, I think would make a lot of sense.
Well, I think removing the fence frees it up for a better discussion about what the benefits of putting a curve in that sidewalk.
Yep. So that was just to keep the pressure off Janelle while she was putting the list together. Thank you, Janelle.
Not a problem. So I've actually combined a couple of items that we talked about. So the first one is a potential fence behind the athletic fields that are adjacent to the residences. Some wanted them, some didn't. No lighting of the athletic fields, low height solar powered lighting around the walking paths, consideration of different windows, color, and cornice on the buildings to promote a more historic and residential aesthetic, which you guys said you were working on. No new outfall into Blockhouse Pond. Consider
Hey, Janelle.
plantings with, yep.
Regarding that one, no new outfall into Blockhouse Pond, I guess from my perspective, I know you guys are working on this, but just to know where the outfalls are going from the stormwater management pond behind the old Thomas building at the athletic fields. And we've been in conversation with the school district already about some existing drainage issues in that area. And I know we'll continue to work those out. So I don't know how that fits into this, but I feel like a lot of my comments would be handled during the final construction plan review process. Sorry about interrupting you.
That's okay. So I just added no new outfall into Blockhouse Pond and identify location of outfalls. Does that help, Charlie?
Yes.
Okay. Consider plantings within the stormwater management facilities. Based on DENREC, they sometimes want some type of planting, not trees. So that was a consideration. Ensure safety for the crosswalk on Sussex Drive, a mural or other traffic control device. I did not spell that right. Permitted by the code. Storage at the Fred Thomas building. That a minimum of 218 trees shall be planted on site and encourage use of native species. That exterior bathroom access to be located at the Fred Thomas building and the Lewes Elementary School. Recommend that mayor and council consider no parking zone along Sussex Drive. If events cause detrimental use of the road, if determined by the city manager and or mayor, event shall be moved to another location, and remove the fence near Blockhouse Pond. Did I capture everything that everybody's been talking about?
I'm only going to add a couple things. Again, I think they can be handled later. Is that we're going to want to look at the Sussex Drive improvements during the construction, final construction plan review, because the city will be maintaining that. Everybody knows that. So and it's changing some where it's going to be widened and curb going further back on Sussex Drive. So I want to make sure I look at that. And then also just possibly, I need to look at it a little bit further, Zach, just maybe looping in that rear 8-inch water main to the 12-inch on Sussex Drive at the parents' entrance towards the back there, but I need to think about that some. But again, I think that's something that I can work out later.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, we definitely understand that this will go through a review with your shop. So,
Yeah.
so it's,
Yeah, to me, these are
this
kind
is
of things
just preliminary.
outside of code requirements.
Right.
Yeah, I thought so, but I didn't know if I should say.
We're not at that point yet. And these are just things that will be all further discussed when we have a public hearing.
Correct.
So,
So these can change. These are just what I heard this committee thinking, that these would be the recommendations to mayor and council, and mayor and council can then add more, subtract, or I think some of these might actually fall away depending on what they do in their interim.
right.
Um,
And
So
some of these will
actually,
get addressed as the plans get refined further.
Charlie's question just now about some of the street improvements reminded me of something that I had in the back of my mind. And again, it may already be clear to everybody else. But I know in the public comments, there were suggestions raised about curbing. To what extent will the length of Sussex Drive be curbed on either or both sides, when this project is done?
So the curbing actually stops just past, as you turn on Sussex Drive from Savannah. I mean, it's basically the first entrance into the existing school now stops. And what we're doing is and if you notice from Savannah to that particular point, the road's actually wide. It's actually 34 foot wide. We're going to continue. So from that point, we're going to continue and redo Sussex Drive from that point all the way across to the property line of the new school. So all of that will have curbing, sidewalk, and it'll be 34 foot wide.
So it'll go all the way up to the the university housing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And what about on the other side of Sussex?
It'll be on both sides.
So will it go all the way down to basically the entrance to Highland Acres on the other side?
No, we'll stop at our property line. I mean,
Which is where the university housing is.
yes.
Okay. Okay, so from where the university housing is on the northeast side, that will be just grass. There won't be a formal curb going down toward Highland Acres.
That is correct.
Okay.
That could be considered by the city going forward.
Right. I mean, and that's why I ask. I mean, if this is my first time through such a joint group like this, but I know that we spend a fair amount of time talking about curbing and sidewalks with residential developments, and I'm not really sure what applies here.
Yeah, there is no curbing and sidewalk in Highland Acres. And so
Fair enough.
You
Yeah,
gotta be
good point.
careful. You gotta be careful about that because it channelizes the runoff. So you have to have some place for it to go to.
right. So you'd have to look at what kind of stormwater management system do you have.
Good point.
Very good point. Thank you. But Janelle, yeah, other than that, I mean, I think this list caught everything that I've heard.
Are there any other
The
comments?
only enhancement I would make on the vegetation and the stormwater thing, what I had in mind, and maybe it's too much of a detail at this stage, was the possibility of trees up on the higher elevations along the edges of the stormwater ponds, where you're transitioning from these athletic fields to people's backyards. But maybe that's done best, one by one with property owners. I don't know. Seems to me you've got to return the grade back to where the yards are, right? Before you go from stormwater pond to somebody's backyard.
Yeah, I mean, everything has to be tied in, but there is a maintenance buffer around the top of stormwater management facilities that are required to maintain those ponds. That way
And
you
that can't have trees.
no.
Mm-mm.
It
Okay.
has to be wide enough for machinery to go around, just for maintenance. But there again, I mean, I think what has been presented is that we understand we're going to be removing some trees back there, but at the same time, please note that there's an existing drainage problem back there that we will be fixing. So hopefully those folks understand that. But if there is some areas that some trees can, be planted between the property line and that maintenance strip around the ponds, I mean, be more than happy to throw some trees in there.
One thing to keep in mind, the public should be aware they can plant their own trees in their own backyards. If they're losing trees that are currently blocking the view from the school district property, feel free to plant your own trees, folks. I mean, just go at it.
Joe. True. Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion with these considerations, to move this forward to council?
I'll move that we send a recommendation to council with the following list of, I don't know what the appropriate term is, draft
Conditions.
conditions
Conditions.
for consideration by city council. The school district has done an excellent job of putting together a plan that I think does everything it can to sensitively balance the needs of the school district, the city, the proximate neighborhoods. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing how it all works out.
Great.
I'll second that. I'll
Thanks,
second.
Joe.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion carries. So this item will now appear on the city council's agenda Monday night for consideration. At which point we will not be taking further comment at that point. We'll just be setting a date for a public hearing.
Mhm.
But it will appear on Monday evening's agenda. Okay,
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a good discussion. It helped, it certainly alerted us to some things we hadn't considered yet. And we appreciate all the thoughtful and balanced comments that we got over the last couple of sessions.
great. Thank you all very much for your work of putting this together. We look forward.
Are we
to-
taking the Q&As? There's 2 Q&As showing up. in
Nope.
the thing?
So,
We-
the record's closed on it.
Close. Okay.
Okay. All
Thank you,
right.
gentlemen.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Meeting
you.
adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.